Morning, Lost People. This is Dave with Lost Farms Homestead. We're at the house in town right now. I got a prepping lesson set up here, Preparedness Workshop, Prepping Basics Part 1. I'm going to run this today, see how it goes. Hopefully we can get a series out of it. I would appreciate comments. I've noticed a large influx of people moving towards the preparedness mindset, prepping kind of a lifestyle, and there's a lot of information out there that's, questionable information, good, bad, whatever, I mean, it's all over the place. You kind of got to dig through it and figure out what's what. So what I've done is I've gone through and found all the information that I could find and compiled it all into one spot and kind of weeded through and took out all the garbage and the stuff that was inaccurate or outdated or, just bad information, because there's a bit of that too. And put it all into one place and kind of tried to format it in a way that makes sense to me. And so I'm going to present it to you. I'll throw it up on the blackboard here, whiteboard, blackboard, whatever, and see if I can help you guys understand a little bit better what it is and what's out there, because when you're first starting into it, it can be really overwhelming. So I figure if I can break it down and make it easier to understand, maybe, I can help some people who are trying to get into it but aren't sure where to start. So if you find this video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you'd consider subscribing. Hit the bell icon. It'll notify you whenever we release new videos. Also, comments help us get through the YouTube algorithms, because they have it set up a certain way where certain likes, comments, all of that kind of stuff help it get promoted and recommended more often. So that's good. And then also, if you think that this video will be helpful to anyone, I'd appreciate it if you'd share it out to them and, perhaps have it be a blessing to someone else as well. So, all right, with that, hang on a second. Coffee, gotta have coffee. Preparedness 101, first thing, coffee. All right, hang on a second. Sorry, I didn't mean to be slurpy. Okay. All right, so let's get this thing started. So first off, you're probably going to see me looking down a little bit here and there, and that's because I'm running this thing off of a laptop. So I'll be back and forth between here and there. So if you see me looking down, that's what that is. So, all right, so what is preparedness and why should we prepare? All right, so preparedness consists of identifying, preventing, and responding to potential accidents and emergency situations while working to mitigate possible injuries associated with them. There are many types, levels, and degrees of preparedness. Most of these include physical and mental preparations, as well as education and/or training for emergency action. Preparedness is essential in avoiding and mitigating a negative outcome during an emergency event. So, pretty much what it is that when bad things happen, if you're not prepared, it's going to be worse. If you're, I'm not saying it's going to be great if you're prepared, but it will help to keep things from being really bad. It's kind of pretty much what it is. All right, so one of the things that you'll see being talked about in preparedness is mindset. Now, mindset gets into a lot of different things and gets pretty deep in the weeds, but we're not going to go into all of that right now. This is just the basics. So what we are going to talk about is proactive versus a reactive mindset. Now, the thing is that being prepared puts you in a mindset to be proactive instead of reactive in an emergency situation. Anytime you're in a situation with a potential for disaster, being prepared allows you to think more clearly and to better assess situations and make better decisions. Any preparations you can do ahead of time will contribute to a positive outcome. However, if you're surprised or caught unprepared, you'll be in a reactive situation, and you will not be able to think clearly and may be prone to making rash decisions that may lead to a negative outcome for you or your group or family. So pretty much what I'm saying is that if an emergency happens and you're prepared for it, you'll better be able to handle the situation than if you're not prepared for it. So, like for instance, if you're in a place where there's like a potential for a blackout, right? And or like being snowed in or something with no power and like that. So you have a backup generator, you stock enough food so that you don't have to leave because everything's snowed in. I mean, you just prepare for the situation. And I mean, people who live in areas like this, like Montana or whatever, where there's potential to be snowed in and lose power, those people, they make sure they have wood for their fireplace, they make sure they have generator with fuel, they make sure they have food and all of those things, so that if there is a blackout, they're not just stuck there, like, I mean, because if you're not prepared and you get snowed in and the power goes out, now you don't have wood, you're going to freeze to death. You don't have food, you're going to starve to death. All your water's frozen. I mean, who knows? So, I mean, it's just a matter of being prepared. So, the proactive mindset will, you'll want to be prepared rather than having a reactive mindset where you're trying to figure out what to do now that you're in that situation. So, proactive versus reactive. So another thing that you'll see come up often in preparedness is layering your preps. So for my part, what I'm thinking in this is a lot of times you'll see a thing that they use. It's an anagram that they use. It's called PACE, P-A-C-E, like this. And pretty much what it means is you have your primary, your alternate, your contingent, and your emergency. So whenever you're working with something, like say for instance, if you're doing your water, right? So if you're trying to figure out a plan for water, so your primary is obviously going to be your house water with your, utility services, whatever. So then your alternate, maybe you have stored water. You got some 55-gallon drums, some 5 gallons, some carboys, whatever, put aside. So then you have an alternate source of water. And then you have a contingent source of water. So maybe you have some water filtering abilities so that you can run through like a Berkey or a Zen filter or something like that. And then after that, when you get to emergency, maybe you're looking for new sources of water. So, water collection or getting it from sources around, maybe there's a river or a lake or whatever, something where you can pull water from. The point of this whole thing is that once your primary runs out, you have your alternate. So while you're using your alternate, you still have your contingent, but you're looking for sources for your emergency and trying to figure out how you're going to deal with it once you get past this one to this one. You know what I'm saying? So you always have something happening, and that's the layering system that we're talking about. So PACE, this is what we use for layering so that we can, make sure that we have multiple layers of preps for when things go sideways. So this is going to be a main thing that we're going to look at along with the proactive and reactive. So just keep that in your head while we go through this series, and it'll come up. So whenever I say PACE and we start talking about this, you'll know what we're talking about. So, all right, so when we talk about preparedness, there are going to be 3 separate levels of preparedness, and it's pretty straightforward. You got basic, intermediate, and advanced. So your basic preparedness, the basic level is, as it's called, the basic preparations. So most people do this without even realizing that they're prepping. This level includes, like for instance, having a first aid kit in your house, carrying a spare tire and jack or an emergency kit in your car, having fire alarms and carbon monoxide detectors in your house. And I mean, it's just your basic stuff, right? So having a med kit in your bathroom, or in your car or whatever. Those kinds of things are the basic stuff. So your intermediate level is going to be like for short-term emergencies that could last for weeks or for months. This level includes storing food and water, having plans for sanitation, light and heat if the power is out, plans for shelter-in-place orders. This level may also include a bug-out location and plan, as well as a security and communications plan. It's always a good thing to have, but those are different degrees. So these are the three levels. There are degrees of preparedness inside of the levels of preparedness, and we'll get to that later on. So the advanced preparedness in that level, this is for long-term emergencies that could last years. So this level includes forming communities and working together to survive after a major disaster. This will include all the previous preparations as well as like agricultural, long-term food production plans. May also include delegating community resources and making sure that everyone is contributing, as well as like bartering with neighboring communities, other things like that. This gets like into really deep kind of stuff. So the advanced one entails a lot of stuff, and not a lot of people go to the advanced level. Usually people go into the basic and intermediate, and they hover around right in this area here. So, but we'll discuss all of it, and then we'll get into the advanced stuff as well. And yeah, we'll break it down for you as best I can. All right. Much like there are different levels of preparedness, there are different categories of emergencies. So you're going to have, and they directly correspond with the levels of prep. So you're going to have emergency situations that are your basic preps, intermediate for short term, and then advanced for long term situations. So your emergency situations. So that's in reference to emergency situations such as power outages, snowstorms, earthquakes, and tornadoes. Many people prepare for these types of emergencies. Some people keep emergency kits in their cars and homes. Some people keep a pantry and a garden. Some people can food and preserve in other ways. And some people keep livestock and poultry. Perhaps the most developed type of preparedness is disaster preparedness. This type of preparedness has been researched and written about extensively in the last few decades. Disaster preparedness is defined by the United Nations as forecasting and taking precautionary measures before an imminent threat when warnings are possible. So in response to that, FEMA and American Red Cross has recommended that everyone keep a 72-hour emergency kit in their home at all times in case of an emergency. So we'll go over that, and that'll all be included in the next section that we're going to be doing. So short term, that's here with the intermediate. Short term situations, that is in reference to disaster situations that will last from 1 to 6 weeks. So it was 14 days from the landfall of Hurricane Katrina until FEMA rescued the last survivors in New Orleans. More than 1,800 people died. The 2019 California power shutoffs, known as the Public Safety Power Shutoff Events, or PSPS events. These were massive preemptive power shutoffs that occurred in approximately 30 counties in Northern California and several areas in Southern California from October 9th to November 20th in 2019. These blackouts lasted 1 month, 1 week, and 4 days. So short-term preparations are for the possibility that for whatever reason, help may not come. It is possible that in the case of a major natural disaster or a terrorist attack causing a grid down situation, especially in like a cyber attack or an infrastructure attack, causing a grid down situation, that we may be forced to wait weeks for help to arrive. Preparation for short-term emergency requires more food and water preparations, as well as considerations for alternate power, heat, light sources, and other considerations should include fuel and battery stores, medical provisions, security, and other communications. So your intermediate should include a lot more than just your basic emergency. So your basic is going to be your 72-hour kit, and your intermediate is going to run a bit longer than that. So your long-term situations, so your advanced preps for long-term situations, This is in reference to disaster situations that are indefinite, such as a permanent grid down failure or an economic or governmental collapse. This type of situation has never occurred in the United States, but we have seen the carnage that can be caused in other countries, like the blackout in Italy in 2003, or the crisis in Venezuela during the Bolivarian Revolution of 2012. These situations permanently changed the way of life of the people who lived in those countries. During the transition periods, things can become very violent and there can be a scarcity of food and clean water. And in this situation, you'll need to consider new sources for food and water, such as agriculture and animal husbandry. You'll need to consider alternate energy sources, medical care, and communications. Security will be a major concern in this situation. And you'll want to have people, community is a necessary in a long-term situation. A single person or family will not be able to survive alone in that situation. So when you get into your advanced stuff, we're talking about like community, mutual assistance groups, long-term agriculture, things like that. So this gets into a bit more advanced kind of things. And right now we're not going to get into all of that stuff. Right now I'm just kind of breaking down how and what and all of that, and then we'll get into it in later on. So this is just a breakdown of the basics of what it is. So along with the different categories of emergencies, there are also different types of situations. So you've got accidental emergencies, natural disasters, man-made disasters, technological disasters, economic disasters, and civil and political disasters. So accidental emergencies, like these here, this is preparing for things that can happen at any time accidentally, such as like a house fire, a car crash, or a field injury, or a medical emergency of some kind. These things are more difficult to prepare for because they happen randomly every day, and you never know when it's going to happen to you. So it could be like just keeping a medical kit in your vehicle, or things like that, like keeping water and food and a medical kit and blankets in your car, things like that. So natural disasters are things that are more along the lines of earthquakes, tornadoes, hurricanes, snowstorms, wildfires, droughts, and flooding. Those things are all specific to certain areas, and most people who live in those areas know what to expect, and they know how to prepare for those kinds of events. So, for instance, people in Florida know how to prepare for hurricanes. People in Kansas know how to prepare for tornadoes. So that kind of a thing. But, so yeah, natural disasters. And then you have like your man-made disasters. These are things like, and man-made disasters can be accidental or intentional. So this kind of covers things like accidental disasters, or things like explosions or industrial accidents or chemical or oil spills, train derailments, plane crashes, things like that. So those are the accidental ones. But then there are also intentional disasters that could be like foreign or domestic terrorism, or active shooter incidents, or home invasions. So those also are things that we would want to prepare for, and they would fall under man-made disasters. So then you got technological disasters. Now, technological disasters are like breakdown of the system, or engineering, like a power plant failure, or a dam failure, or a bridge or building collapse, or like grid down or rolling blackouts, things like that have to do with technology and infrastructure. So things like that. That's going to be your technological disasters. And then you have economic disasters. So that could be anything from depression or inflation, loss of income, food shortages, interruptions in the supply chain due to the economy, or it could be as simple as the government enacting laws that restrict our ability to maintain gainful employment. So That's economic disasters. And then civil, political disasters, that covers more of like civil unrest, riots, mandatory stay-at-home orders, or martial law. These things typically happen in urban environments, but it can spill over into the surrounding rural areas. So, but I mean, typically you're not going to see riots in a rural setting. It's going to be in the urban settings where you're going to see riots and things like that, right around population density. You know, the farther away from large population densities you get, the less civil and political unrest that you're going to see. So, now we'll get into each of these in further detail throughout the lessons, but this is just an idea of the different types of situations that can fit into the different categories here with your emergency, short-term and long-term. So depending on what they are and what degree they are, you know, these things are going to fall into it. So you're going to have your different levels of preparedness, you're going to have your different categories of emergencies, and then your different types of situations that fall into all of these. So, all right, so the next thing about types of situations is that every situation that you're going to be in, no matter what happens, there's going to be phases, and there are always 3 phases. That's before, during, and after. Before an event, you have time to take certain precautions that can have drastic effects on the outcome. Whether you take those precautions or not often depends on, you know, time and money. Sometimes it depends on if you even know to take those precautions. For instance, if you just move to a new area and you're not aware of the dangers of that area, you can't really prepare for them until someone who lives there tells you about it. But with the proper research, you should be able to find out, you know, most things. So, but no one can possibly account for everything. So, a lot of times there are things that you won't know until it happens. But before is when you want to do most of your preparations. That's why it's called preparing. You do it ahead of time. So before is the phase where you want to do most of your preparing. During an event, having a plan will put you more at ease and reduce the likelihood of panic. So panic during an event can cause you to make rash decisions that could lead to a negative outcome. Proper training and practice of the necessary skills builds the courage and confidence required to overcome adversity in most situations. So, when you set up all of your physical preps and all of that stuff, that's all before. Also, before you do training and education, learn as much as you can, train as much as you can, get as much knowledge and experience as you can ahead of time, and then that'll help you during. So that's a big deal. And then after an event happens, knowing how to assess the situation and having contingencies in place will allow you to make an educated decision as to your best course of action following a specific sequence of events. So most major events are the accumulation of a series of smaller events leading up to that major event. So situational awareness is a major factor in being prepared. Knowing what's happening around you will inform you of the situation and help you make better decisions as to your best course of action. So all of this put together is being prepared, and you need to know, you know, you want to be trained and understand and know what to do before, during, and after as many situations as you can. I mean, and then we're going to get into that, what actually to prepare for, because I mean, there are a lot of things that you will not need to prepare for. I mean, if the nearest nuclear power plant to you is like 500 miles away, you don't need to prepare for a nuclear meltdown. You know what I'm saying? So, but if you have earthquakes, you're going to want to be prepared for an earthquake. So there's a lot of things that go into it, and we'll get into that in the next section where we'll start talking about risk assessment and understanding what you need to prepare for. So, but you'll want to prepare for all 3 phases of whatever situations you're going to want to be preparing for. So I'm going to leave it there right now. So these are the basics for part 1, and then we'll continue in part 2. So thanks for watching our video. Stick around, stay tuned. We're going to do part 2. Like and subscribe. Share it out if you think it'll be helpful. Thanks.